Hello, and welcome to another episode of the IT News Podcast. On the show this week, we have ACT Government Chief Digital Officer Bettina Konti talking about digital transformation in the nation's capital. Konti spoke to IT News as part of the 2021 State of the IT Report, which assesses how Australia's states and territories are travelling with digital government. Please enjoy. Thank you for joining us to discuss the ACT's digital government progress as part of this report that we're producing called the State of IT. The ACT has a strong history of investment in common platforms, helped by, I guess, its small size and shared services model. I feel like it's really contributed. And that's been something the government adopted some years ago. Did these sort of strong foundations help the state respond to the pandemic? And in what areas was it able to move fast to support the community?
Yes, so we have a central shared services capability, so finance, HR and ICT. Recently, so November last year, the ICT part of shared services moved in under my leadership. So we've actually now got a group called Digital Data and Technology Solutions. But when the pandemic first hit in March last year, there had already been work. We were most of the way through our Office 365 implementation. And so most of us were on the same desktop. And so most of us had access to Microsoft Teams and WebEx. There was only very limited use of those tools at that time. But straight away, lockdown, bang, we're all using those tools. So the biggest issue that our shared services guys had was how they were going to get access to increased capacity to enable the load that we were all putting on the system. So that was really good. And I would say that was, we were able to respond and move to that working from home model faster than many government departments because largely that planning was in place and it was underway.
And how about, I guess, more broadly across the community? Were the services that the ACT government offers citizens adequate to support the immediate needs that emerged in the first wave and then also after that?
So we moved really, really quickly into online service delivery. A lot of the services for people in the community are online in a way. So they're I would call them paper online, so smart forms. So a lot of the services that people want access to were available like that in the first place. So there was just more reliance placed on them. Access Canberra had already implemented, like many other government departments, many other jurisdictions, being able to renew your working with vulnerable people, being able to renew your driver's licenses without having to come into the contact centre. It was difficult in the first phases from what the Access Canberra guys have told me. So really difficult to register a car and actually take the rego plates without a physical interaction. But to start with, we had people driving them around to people's homes. The advantage of a small jurisdiction, right? You couldn't do that in New South Wales all that easily. With this time around with the pandemic, it was a much easier move to an online delivery model for places like Access Canberra, simply because we'd done it before, so we know how to move that way. We've done a lot of increasing capacity of phone lines and other things. And we're now starting to take COVID-safe appointment bookings online for people to be able to come in and do what they need to do without having to, line up the way that we did last time. So, lots to learn.
Yeah, and you mentioned paper online, I guess, is the way you've described it. Obviously, there's quite a big program, it seems, that is underway currently in the ACT. And that was outlined in the strategy last year, released just prior to the first wave of lockdowns that we had in March 2020. It seemed the ACT placed quite a big focus on linked up online services through the ACT digital program. How has this program progressed in the last 18 months or so? And yeah, I mean, how does this differ to the paper online services you were referring to before?
That's a good question, Justin. So I can tell now that you've read the ACT Digital Strategy. So the ACT Digital program is different because it's looking to actually create online and digital experiences for people. And we know that the better we know people, the better we can serve up services to people. The vision here is really that government services are just so easy that they just happen. So uh, the end state is very much akin to, imagine you're walking down the street and there's a beep on your phone and it says your rates are due, or your child who might be in school has got a movie or an excursion that they need to go on. Do you agree? Yes or no? Would you like to pay for your rates now? Yes or no? Set them for payment, make a payment arrangement, whatever it is. So a lot of that proactive service delivery doesn't come from asking people in the community to fill in a form online and then send it off. So those forms are very static. Every time you fill one in, you've got to put your name, your address, your date, sometimes your date of birth and other information, and it's just repeating things that government already knows. So key part of the ACT Digital program is the ACT Digital account. It's our version of the digital identity. And what we're hoping is that will become an asset that people can use to then make choices about how it is that they want to consume services from ACT government. So you asked a question about how has that program gone through the pandemic. There have been a couple of active pauses that we have made to that program because we needed to pivot the staff and the team to COVID response type programs. But we have delivered a new system for Access Canberra to be able to administer working with vulnerable people applications. And as part of that, we delivered the ability for them to administer the NDIS worker screening rules that have come in from February this year. So that's been done, and we're most of the way through the design work for what we're calling whole of government concessions, which is if I am entitled to a concession, I should prove my eligibility. I should only have to prove my eligibility for that once, and then that eligibility should apply to deliver automatic discounts for everything else that particular concession type allows. So it's actually trying to value add to people in the community rather than say, well, in order to get this benefit, you've got to fill in this form.
And those services you described there, are those in addition to there was talk about 4 pilot services that were using the Tell Us Once functionality in the strategy. Those were delivered prior to the release, obviously. Are those services you're describing there, are those in addition to those ones?
Yeah, they are. So the 4 pilot services was, I guess, testing or proving the concept, and that happened prior to 2018 in a program that was called iConnect at the time. So those 4 services, 3 of them are still working today or are still being consumed today. So probably the most helpful one for people in the community is what's called rental bond help. So ACT government and particularly ACT housing, they offer interest-free loans to people, eligible people. So this is people on low incomes who might not otherwise be able to secure the ability to rent residential accommodation in the private market without a loan of some description, and often it is their financial situation that prevents them from being able to do that. So ACT government will offer interest-free loans for them to be able to pay for their bond. And that used to be a process that would require 2 or 3 trips to ACT housing in Belconnen, multiple forms, the provision of multiple evidence, so 52 pay slips to make up a full year and all that. So now through the ACT digital program, they can get kind of a pre-approval of their eligibility for this and be able to show that the real estate agent as proof that they've got the ability to cover the bond, and give them a better chance of being able to be successful in private rental market. So that's one. Another one is the diversity register. So that allows people to apply for ACT government board positions and things like that. And that one's actually really important because it formed the base capability that we reused to be able to deliver jobs for Canberrans through the pandemic.
Okay.
Where we provided the ability for ACT government to hire people that didn't have access to Job Seeker through the Commonwealth. So these are people who might be overseas students on international visas. Other people, for whatever reason, weren't eligible for Job Seeker, were able to continue to earn a living in the ACT.
Very interesting. Especially around streamlining some of those processes that otherwise would have taken much longer previously. So very interesting. I also noted that there was quite a big uptick in the number of people that had a digital account. So there were something like 14,000 at the end of 2019, and that's now much closer to 100,000. We're sort of sitting at about 80,000.
It's over 100 now.
What's driving that? I mean, is it the services that are being delivered, or is it there are other factors at play?
I think it's the services that are being delivered. So there's 130,000 people in the ACT that have working with vulnerable people cards. So that's, somewhere between a quarter and a third of the population. So working with vulnerable people is now a service that sits behind the digital account. So that's certainly part of it. And our I guess moving into the future, where a service is not just going to a website and finding information, where in order to get the service we need to know who you are. That service, whenever it's changed or if a new service comes through, if it is for a citizen, it will come through the ACT digital account. So the idea is eventually more and more people will have one. It will become the obvious way to deliver value. So for people to get a digital account, it's very much like, I don't want to compare it to the MyGov service, but it's a similar sign-on process, right? You can have a digital account at a level 1 where it's just your name and address, email, but there's no actual identity verification, and you can have a digital account and you can do certain things at that level. But for a working with vulnerable people card, we actually need you to do the proof of identity. And the idea is you go through that once, but for other services that come online that need to know who you are, you don't have to go through that again because you've already got a digital account, and therefore we will know who you are as soon as you sign on with that credential. And government will know who they are when they come through the door, and that will mean that we'll be able to serve up things that are personalised and specific to them.
So in that way, the digital account does align very closely with the federal government's TDIF framework that they've come up with around digital identity, and it's got those proofing levels that you'd see in the MyGov ID solution. It's got based on exactly what I guess permissions you need.
Yes, so it aligns with TDIF, and we, like other states and territories, have agreed to continue to align with TDIF, and we're working with Commonwealth and our state and territory partners to basically join these up and federate them into what we're calling a digital identity ecosystem. And so there's a bit to do there yet, because we need to be able to ensure that regardless of whether I have an ACT digital account, a Service New South Wales account, and MyGov ID, I am able to use that to get access to services at the state, federal and local level without having to reprove who I am. Because if we can't achieve that, then the digital identity isn't value in the hands of a citizen.
And the ACT is also playing quite a significant role in a national pilot program around helping parents to enrol their newborns, register their newborns. Can you take us through this program and what it entails? And does this sort of feed into the ACT digital program as well? Is this one of the services that you intend to offer through that eventually?
Another good question. Thanks, Justin. Yes, the ACT is working closely with Services Australia on the Birth of a Child program. This is one of the programs that's sponsored by the Data and Digital Ministers. ACT is the lead jurisdiction. A lot of the work and the heavy lifting is being done by Services Australia. The vision here is why should new parents tell government that they've had a baby? Because government already knows, because the baby has been born in the government health system. Therefore, we should be able to reuse the information that's collected in the health system and use that information to be able to create the birth registration, the Medicare enrolment, and the Centrelink proof of birth record. The Medicare enrolment, once you've got that, the byproducts of that are things like the My Health record creation and the Australian immunisation record for the child. So if a parent, ultimately, if the parents go and fill in the patient admission form. So by far the bulk of families go and have their children in the health sector. Some have them at home, but the midwives will also have to witness the birth, and I guess it's the source of truth for a new baby born in Australia is the health system. So that information set should actually be the same information set that's used to create that child record in all of those other systems at the federal and the state level, and thereby reducing burden on the parents. The parents should only have to provide the information that government doesn't have, which is things like what's the baby's name, what would you like the baby. Yeah. So that's what we're trialling. We're trialling that in the ACT and in Queensland. The great news about this is that we've got all birth, deaths and marriages agencies across the country have been involved in this program, and they're all really supportive. So that's good. The outcomes that we can achieve through this are way beyond just efficiency for governments and ease of use for parents. They also go to things like preventing persistent disadvantage in vulnerable communities. We know that while it's free to register a birth, people need to pay money to actually get proof of that birth in the form of a birth certificate. So some people don't do that because they think it'll cost them money. And so when they don't register their children and those children then want to go and get a driver's license or get a job, they can't prove who they are, and that is a significant barrier to access to things for people in those communities.
Digital ACT is obviously an example of where the government's trying to, I guess, reduce duplication and maximise some of those returns by tying things together. But it's certainly not the only area that the government's doing this in. It's, obviously, we mentioned before, the Shared Services Program is quite a big internal program looking at that. How else is the Office of the Chief Digital Officer maximising the territory's, I guess, limited budget when it comes to these digital initiatives? Is it things like reusing common platforms where possible?
So we have formed a nice network right across ACT government with our wonderful CIOs in the 8 directorates, and together, so the central ICT group, DDTS as we're now called, plus our CIOs come together in a few different forms during the ACT government year. We come together as the technology leadership group, which is where we do things like discuss what are the things that we've got in our kit bag, what strategically are the systems that we want to continue to invest in and grow, and then be able to create capabilities and deliver solutions that are going to be used on a multi-directorate or whole of government basis. And what are those ones that are specific to directorates that, very much need to stay within the directorate. We know that, like lots of jurisdictions, we've got a lot of legacy that we are going to need to churn through over the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years. How we churn through that legacy is going to be key for us in terms of how we use, as you said, the limited government budget that we've got, being such a small jurisdiction, for absolute maximum value. So I think we've all recognised that being able to come together and deliver a good product or solution once and be able to reuse that many times is always going to be a better outcome than trying to deliver it 8 times with a 8 times smaller budget.
Mm.
There are a lot of things that we need to address in terms of how technology and technology investment needs to be a consideration that is far further forward in the cycle in order to be able to gain that maximum utility from the technology. So, good policy, if you like, good policy is implementable. And the way that we implement policy these days more and more is through technology solutions that work with people and process. Technology Leadership Group, or the CIOs, and ourselves come together as a budget assessment subcommittee as well. So we have a role to provide advice to government about any budget business cases that have a digital component to them or a technology component to them. And that's one of the ways in which we can ensure that we continue to move in the direction that we've set for ourselves.
And one of the, I guess, the projects that you've been doing more recently is creating a whole of government business architecture. How does this, I guess, align with that need to, maximize those investment decisions?
Yeah, so it's actually a really important piece of that puzzle. So we know that across ACT government, there's over 2,000 applications. And those applications, they might sit on the shared services infrastructure, but by and large, they're maintained and supported by directorates, other than the big corporate ones like the payroll and finance ones and the ACT digital account. When just being able to understand those business systems, so government budget processes tend to focus on a specific program or a specific outcome that they're seeking to deliver at a particular time. And we need to get a lot more clever as the technology people in ACT government to be able to connect that to system capability or pattern. So is this particular government measure going to require a case management capability, for example? Is it community, is the implementation of this policy direction going to impact on the community in a way that they're going to need to interact with government? How much of that interaction is able to be done online and digitally? What is the pattern? Do we need to know who they are? We can reuse the digital account. Is it just information that they need to seek and maybe eligibility criteria? Well, we'll reuse the website that we've got for that. Payments platforms is another one. So is there a payment or refund likely to be required through this capability? Well, whole of government payments platform would always be easier than multiple different ways to pay and multiple different platforms to use it. So the business architecture is looking to, has identified for us those common system capabilities that we want to implement either for multi-directorate or whole of government purposes. And our job now is to create the roadmap for that and have done some thinking and some early concept design about how we might go about doing that, so that when the next government priority comes down the path, it might be an opportunity to start to create some of the capabilities that we don't already have in our kit bag.
And was that architecture in response in any way, I guess, to, there was an audit report about sort of 2 and a bit years ago that talked a little bit about the need to improve strategic IT planning, and it found that the previous approach under the 2016 strategy wasn't as effective as it could be. Is that one of the ways the government is looking to address those concerns?
Yes, but I think it's fair to say we would have done it anyway. So yes, there was a report that suggested we needed to improve strategic ICT planning, and I would agree with the recommendations of that report. And some of this is about what I was talking about before, which is technology needs to become embedded into the life cycle of how we do business in ACT government. At the moment, it isn't. It's a bit of an afterthought. So we do the business of government and then go, oh, what technology will we need for that?
Mm.
And by the time you get there, by the time the policy decision's made and it's been announced, everybody's in a hurry to get it done and implemented. And if you don't think about the technology until that point, then your only options are to implement with what you've already got. So that's what we're trying to get to, where there's a lot of pre-thinking that we've done together as a cohort with the CIOs, so that when those new policy priorities are proposed, we're ready to come with well, this could be implemented in these kinds of ways, and these could get you these benefits in these ways. And so hopefully over time, we'll get technology just being a natural byproduct of a policy decision.
I wanted to touch a little bit on cybersecurity. And from what I can see, it's clear that the ACT has got some pretty effective strategies, a suite of policies, in fact, when it comes to cybersecurity, although I can't actually see them. There are quite a few different frameworks that exist. But there was an audit again last year that found that the compliance with those policies wasn't always as good as it could be, not quite up to scratch. And it led the auditor to conclude that the public service wasn't well placed to understand, the data that agencies are responsible for and the kinds of risk that exists. So, yeah, I just wanted to get a feeling for like how the government's been working to address these concerns in the last year or so.
So the first thing that I'll say is there was a figure reported in that data security report that said that 89% of our government critical and business critical systems didn't have current security risk management plans. Key word there is current. A lot of them, nearly all of them had some kind of security risk management plan. It's just that a lot of them were out of date. And the timing of the data security audit plus the fact that we know that we've got a lot of legacy systems and are figuring it, we're pouring our energy into figuring out how to move them to something that is supportable, is secure, is more fit for purpose, probably is indicative of how we're not spending a lot of time doing updating security risk management plans for systems that firstly aren't connected to the internet, and secondly, we know we need to replace them. So that's probably the first thing I say. But into the more strategic question that you've asked there, we know that we need to do more work in the cybersecurity and improve our resilience space. We've got some good resilience in what I would call our infrastructure kind of layers. Where I think we can improve is in raising people's awareness about the risks and the threats, because I think we could do more there. We have done a couple of things since that report was published. The first is we've published a data governance and management framework and guide, and that is, I guess, the whole of government level. How is it that we want to be looking to improve how we manage and how we govern our data holdings in ACT government? And how it is that we mature our approaches in a consistent way across government. We've also commissioned a whole of government threat and risk assessment to try and get ourselves a a baseline of where are we at and a baseline set of recommendations and priorities for where should we focus our energy and attention first, second, third and fourth. And that will help to guide our investment in improving our resilience.
Just coming back to that point you mentioned regarding, I guess, the current, the critical systems and the current response disaster plans, is that just does that come down to just the resourcing and the budget that the government has to, put aside for cybersecurity? Is that it, or are there other considerations there that need to be taken into account?
We could talk all day about this. There's a few things that we need to fix in the system, really. So we've got a central ICT security team within Digital Data and Technology Solutions, and they do a lot of the work. Obviously, they do the cybersecurity operations for our infrastructure and our corporate systems, but they also provide advice, guidance, and do security assessments for directorates. Directorates have their CIOs that have got a lot of, all of the business applications that they look after, and a lot of the other kind of work at the directorate level. I think there's a better balance and a better mix between what gets done in the centre and what and how is it that we can better support our CIOs. So cybersecurity training materials, probably best developed once and used many times. The deep cybersecurity, incident management, threat analysis people probably should be in the centre, because I'm not sure that ACT government can afford to have 8 cybersecurity operations centres across ACT. So there's different mixes of roles and responsibilities that I think we need to think about in order to get the best bang for the current dollar. And then there's also obviously discussions with government about how we can increase the share of the dollar to help with the emerging cybersecurity risks.
That was Bettina Konti, the ACT government's Chief Digital Officer. And that's the podcast for this week. We'll be back with an exciting new interview next week. Until then, you can check out the State of the IT report and catch all the latest headlines in Australian IT over at itnews.com.au.